rolling hills, plains of plenty, over 40 shades of green, a friendly, familiar patchwork, much the same now as when those first farmers, our forefathers, tilled, sowed, and reaped. Season after season, generation after generation, fair weather, a rich crop, the prayer and expectation. Now the work is done by tractor, plough, and combine. But in olden days, there were different ways. Long forgotten sights and sounds, manpower, animal power, steam power, all played their part over the years in saving the harvest. Over 100 years ago, this was a common sight in Irish fields. The farmer depending on horsepower, or in this case, donkey power, to get the work done. A single furrow plough opening up the rich, warm earth. Here the farmer has not only increased the power, 3 donkeys instead of 2, but the plough is more sophisticated in design. The wheels at the front taking some of the weight, and the disc helping prepare the ground for the point of the plough. This again is an example of a single furrow plough, but this is a wooden plough, a rarity. Drawn by 2 Clydesdale horses, although here a neighbour is lending a helping hand, this was usually a lone man operation, guiding the horses and guiding the plough. The essence of good ploughing is a straight, single furrow of even depth. This calls for not only a keen eye, but also a steady hand on the plough. And remember, you are never too young to learn. A man, 2 donkeys, a pony, and a cultivator. After the field was ploughed, the cultivator or harrow was used to break up the ground in preparation for the seed. Again, this was an oh-so-familiar scene coming up to the turn of the century in our Irish fields. Stepping out in unison, teamwork the key. Heel for heel, toe for toe. The bond between ploughman and horses is vital. This was another type of cultivator at home on Irish farms. The rigid points of the harrow eating into the ground in the wake of a pair of Clydesdales. The ploughing done, the harrowing finished, the seed is sown. And after the rain of spring, the sun of summer, and a field of ripened wheat stands proud, awaiting its reaping. Dating from biblical times, this wicked-looking implement, the sickle, was for centuries the only implement used to cut the corn. Slowly and laboriously, the reaper made his way methodically from one side of the field to the other, from headland to headland, cutting with a steady rhythm of strokes, careful to cut only the corn and not a finger or thumb. Each handful of wheat tossed into a row, from which it will be gathered into sheaves. Gathering up an armful of wheat, some of the corn is used to circle the bundle, and a sheaf is born, held together with a makeshift knot. Tossed one side, later these sheaves will be stacked to await the thresher, which will separate grain and straw. In time, the scythe replaced the sickle and allowed the reaper to get the work done with greater ease. Using a steady gait and swinging motion, he cuts a swathe through the field. Here's another expert at work, and another example of how to make a sheaf. Again, a good bundle of wheat. But the rope of straw owes its origin to a different technique. A deft flick of the wrist, a makeshift knot, and another sheaf awaits the next stage of harvesting. In time, the mechanical reaper was to replace the sickle and scythe. The hungry blade of the reaper propelled back and forth by the motion of the machine, taking in a much wider swathe than that of either sickle or scythe. A two-man operation this, one to guide the horses, the other laying off the corn, feeding it into the blade. Both men working in relative comfort, seats on a machine. Here we see a field of barley awaiting a more advanced mowing machine. First, though, the draft horse is groomed and got ready for a long day's work in the field. Groomed and harnessed, this pair of draft or working horses are backed carefully into the reaper. Whoa, whoa back there. One on either side of the shaft in this sail reaper. Very much a one-man, two-horse operation, the sail reaper moves along the headland before beginning its work proper. Technology has taken over, and the red sails are doing the work of the helper and his rake, feeding the barley into the blade. Now a rarity, the Binlow binder, drawn here by a Titan steam engine, marked a significant advance in farm mechanization. A product of the early 20th century, the Binlow brought us one step closer, the modern-day combine harvester. With the corn cut and gathered, there still remained the problem of separating grain and straw. Once done by hand using the flail, by the turn of the century, steam was being harnessed to operate threshing mills. This small stationary mill would have been used in the barn or shed to thresh small amounts of grain when needed. The corn fed in at the top, the threshing or separation process done by the machine, and the grain fed out from small chutes. The large threshing mill was in operation in this country as recently as the 1940s and in some cases the 50s. This was threshing on a grand scale. The noisy steam engine, belching smoke, and threshing mill parked beside the stack of sheaves. The sheaves were fed into the mill at a steady pace, and the grain and straw separated. This was work for all the farm family, with neighbours coming to lend a helping hand. Noisy, dusty, thirsty work. But even the days of the threshing mill were to be numbered. The arrival of the first combine harvester in the 1930s was to see to that. Developed for the grain belt of the Midwestern states, it soon crossed the Atlantic. This machine, from McGee's of RD, had a special engineer come to assemble it on site in the farm. First, the sails had to be placed in position. Famous names from the past, how they live on. McCormick International. Gleaming and greased, ready for a long day's work. Like the binder, the sails feed the corn into the mower. The reaper, binder, threshing mill, all redundant. This combine, drawn by an Alice Chalmers tractor, once a familiar sight on Irish farms, with its oh so distinctive front wheels close together. Here was another combine, again from McGee's of RD, drawn by another tractor, familiar to generations, the trusty Ferguson. The combine eating its way through the field, disgorging primitive bales as it goes. The combine, the farmer's friend, in all its splendor. The advances in technology that saw the reaper develop into the combine were matched in other areas as well, like the plough, an Oliver tractor and an Oliver two-furrow plough. The huge iron wheels ensured a greater grip. Here we see more iron wheels, guaranteed to grip, a John Deere tractor. This plough was capable of ploughing to different depths, dependent on the soil type and the crop to be planted. No cabs here. The driver was open to all elements. But this Fordson tractor is still giving loyal service on some farms, although a more familiar sight in the 1950s. And its two-furrow plough is also of more recent vintage. Single furrow grew to 2 furrow, and in time 4 furrow. Drawn here by a mighty John Deere. Just like the plough, the basic design of the tractor has more or less remained unchanged over the years. But the pressure of getting more work done in less time has been ever present, and the manufacturers have sought to address the need for improvement through changes in size, shape, and power. Like prehistoric monsters of the past, these servants of Irish farming have long retired. But occasionally, they're persuaded to come out of retirement and are put through their paces to delight new generations. A king amongst ploughs was the balance plough, developed as a response to the ravages wrought by the famine of 150 years ago. 2 powerful steam engines were positioned on the headlands on either side of the field, and using a winch, the 4-furrow plough and its human cargo was drawn across the field. While the balance plough could plough a field in record time, the cost proved prohibitive to all but the wealthiest of landowners. And what started from the noble ideal of feeding the starving is now only a curiosity. Nowadays, the implements of yesteryear no longer plough nor harvest in the fields of Ireland, but they can be seen working at specially organised vintage shows, such as the famous Cooley Show, the brainchild of John Hanlon. The harvest saved, the work is done. It's time for a day out. Once a familiar sight in every town and village as the local farmer delivered the milk. No pasteurization, no bottles, no cartons here. It was fresh and straight from the churn. Served here by the prettiest of milkmaids, Caroline Hanlon. Get ready to place your bets. They're off and running for the Donkey Derby. We might know how many started, but that's not to say we'll ever know how many finished, or even when. They're beginning to bunch as they come to the first corner, and he's coming with a great gallop. Next stop, Beecher's Brook, if he ever stops in time. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. But it's tough too, when you can't even get going. Might have to be a steward's inquiry into this. He's well out in front. There's no stopping him. Did I speak too soon? Sometimes it's hard to keep up with this hectic speed. Did any wonder when someone lends a helping hand? Or in this case a boot, up you by ya! And he's into the home straight. There's no stopping him now. First past the post, and the winner takes all. I was right. There is no stopping him. The Vintage Day is certainly a day of contrasts, from the excitement of the Donkey Derby to a man and his dog, each going through their paces. The silence of the handler emphasizing the bond between master and animal. For more than a century, children of all ages have been able to get up and away on the swinging boats. Trotting to the fair, a day out for the gentry. Nowadays, just for show. Let's strike up the band, or in this case, the fairground organ. A fully automated, mechanical marvel. What tales it could tell of travels the length and breadth of Britain and Ireland to shows and fairs. Steam engines come in all shapes and sizes. In this case, the golden gondola, gleaming, shining, throbbing with power from the golden days of steam, rubbing shoulders with the modern marvels. The traditional way of life is brought to life in miniature. A peep into the past with this animated model. The weaver at work at her mechanical loom. water-driven corn mill and the blacksmith's forge. And there's even time for a tune. All the fun of the fair, in miniature. Whether in miniature or reality, steam engines have held a fascination for young and old, for decades. Here a magnificent example of how things were done in days gone by. A William Foster steam engine, seen at work. These were built to last. Small wonder, they're still working to this very day. Gleaming and shining, polished to perfection. A modern-day expert casts his eye over the working parts, first put together 60 years ago. Nowadays, running water on the farm and in the home is taken for granted. In the bad old days, the water was drawn by hand, back-breaking work. So the water pump was a great invention. There were big pumps and small, pumps of every kind, simple and complicated, intricate and ingenious. Water on tap. Just like the harvest in days of old, when the crops were saved with the help of neighbours from near and far, so the visitors have come from far and wide, from Derry to Kerry and beyond the Irish Sea. Spectators, exhibitors, experts, enthusiasts, novices, all eager for the sights and sounds of a bygone age, on parade. Stand well back, we're coming through. Did I say all shapes and sizes? David Brown, Fordson, Ferguson, Alice Chalmers, John Deere. Names from the past. Synonymous with Irish agriculture. Small wonder that Fordson and Ferguson owe their origin to Irish emigrants. Harry Ferguson, a son of Antrim, Henry Ford, a son of Cork. Both made their way, made their fortunes in America. Their inventions made their way back across the Irish Sea and have been part of Irish farming for generations. Vintage machinery of all variety. The parade is coming your way. For the old a chance to recapture the past. For the young, a chance to understand and learn more about how lives were lived by long-gone generations. The ones who made us what we are. The ones who worked long hours from dawn till dusk, in all weathers. They ploughed, sowed, reaped, and saved the harvest.
Young and old gather here to be a part of yesteryear, a part of a life that our forebears led, when fiery furnaces and beautiful beasts worked the rich land of Ireland. This Fowler ploughing engine, dating from 1918, is one of the stars of the show. They were designed by John Fowler, an Englishman. After a visit to Ireland in 1846, when the horror of the famine was still with us, he decided to invent a way of ploughing the ground quickly. And in 1864, he demonstrated the first two steam ploughing engines, which ploughed 8 acres in 2 hours. Another steam engine, this one designed for less dramatic reasons. It's a Ruston Showman's engine, dating from 1919. All types of farm machinery, which will be a familiar sight to those who grew up on Irish farms, is on display here. Take a look at this century-old hand thrasher. An array of all sorts of horse-drawn machinery can be seen. Here we have a colourful one-horse mower. A turnip slicer, which was used to make the feed for horses and cattle. Wooden weighing scales, over 100 years old. A horse cultivator for tilling the land. Different types of drill ploughs which would have been pulled by horses. A turnip pulper. An old horse-drawn slipe. A potato saddle harrow for levelling the tops of drills. In the old days, the fields of Ireland must have been a colourful place indeed, as the machinery on show here demonstrates. This strange-looking piece of equipment has been painted and renovated by local coolie men. It was a horse-drawn corn plough. It dates from the late 19th century, and this beautifully restored hay kicker is a very common sight in its day. This horse-drawn manure spreader is one of the rarer exhibits. In fact, it's the only one of its kind in Ireland. The manure would have been loaded into the top and spread as the horses pull it up and down the fields. Dozens of varied implements are on display at this rally. Here we have a turnip barrel, and if one is going to grow turnips, you have to have the implements to work them. Grubbers of all description, scufflers, hunter hoes, Here we have an implement for spreading grass seed. The wooden wheelbarrow, familiar sight in all our farmyards. Ploughs of every description, used for every job. A very unusual machine, again for sowing small seeds. Here we have a machine more familiar in the farm kitchen, the wringer, alongside a very unusual farm implement, a reversible plough, used mostly for horticulture. We're found in our market gardens more often than in our farms in Ireland, all bringing back memories. Only the old-style machinery that you'll see here today. Old-style cooking methods are also being demonstrated. The pig is basted and then carefully cooked to perfection as the crowd watches and hungrily waits.
This is all quite the flavour. Give me a bit of flame again,
A familiar sight on Irish roads to this day is the much-loved bicycle. Not so familiar perhaps is the sidecar. Unfortunately, these have been lost because probably of the amount of cars on our leafy lanes. Right, let's move away from the Irish fields into the Irish kitchen and hear from Madge Boy.
We have here a sewing machine, an old sewing machine, a foot machine, and Bridie is doing patchwork. In the ICA we have renewed the patchwork, and we're very busy now learning patchwork. The bed, this is an old bed of 100 years ago, more maybe, and we have the quilt is patchwork. The quilt on it is patchwork. And the pillow covers were made from old flour bags. Long ago the flour was got in flour bags, and they were bleached. Heart's Delight and that was bleached off them and made into pillow covers. And they are the pillow covers we have. They are almost 100 years. We had no toilets that time, so the pot was used, the chamber in other words, was used. And the beads were there too for the rosary. The rosary was recited every night. Everything we have is well over 100 years.
Everything is
yes, yes, indeed. Yes, even more.
Except Bridie.
Except Bridie, yes. When the cows were milked, the milk was put into the crocks to let it go sour, so that it would be churned then. And everybody had a cow at that time, and the milk was churned and in a dash churn. Well, this is the fire now with the brace on it. Pots were hung on the skillet pot, and the potatoes in a bigger one, especially if the mill was around. That's when the bigger pot would be used for the potatoes.
Now let's move along to see all the equipment in action, just as it was hundreds of years ago. First of all, the familiar Clydesdale and the Irish farm cart. The not so common Shetland pony. This one came from County Armagh to be here. These magnificent Clydesdales are pulling the reversible horse plough that we saw on exhibit earlier. It would have been unusual to see this working in the fields at any time in Ireland. This potato sprayer would have been a common sight around the countryside in the summertime until the early 1960s. In the old days, it was common for farmers to buy equipment between a number of them, and that is how this potato sprayer came to be owned in 1948 by 3 local farmers. It was restored in 1988 after it had been lying neglected for 25 years. It's 50 years since this 2-furrow ransom plough has been in everyday use. Like the reversible plough, it would never have been common due to the amount of horsepower needed to work it. Here the donkeys are pulling a drill plough used to make the ridges to plant potatoes. This was indeed a very common sight in Ireland. Here we have a tractor-drawn plough called a trail plough, manufactured in 1939, and it was pulled by this Fordson tractor. The Fordson tractor always was a favourite with farmers in Ireland. Many of them came over to this country from America at the beginning of the war in 1939-40. The plough that the tractor is pulling was known as a cockshut plough. Again, very popular with the farming community. In the shadow of Maid's Gap, where she came with her armies on her cattle raid, this 1942 David Brown tractor has been used to till the land, pulling a disc harrow. And indeed we have the public giving a helping hand, their weight helping to drive the ploughs into this heavy land. We move again from the ploughing demonstration and go over into the cornfield. These majestic, strong horses working the fields of Ireland, the countryside in the old days must have been a wonderful sight. These three Clydesdales are pulling a 50-year-old Albion binder, which both cuts and ties the corn to be neatly stooked and stacked later on. This is the very first type of combine harvester in Ireland, the Trailer McCormick International Combine. The Alice Chamber model tractor that's pulling it is the one originally used to do so all those years ago. Combine was bought in a box from the Gees of Ardee by Jimmy Shannon in 1936, another local man, and assembled in his farmyard by an engineer who had to come the whole way from England to do the job. It was worked on the Shannon's farm until 1954, when it was replaced by a self-propelled model. This combine harvester then lay disused for years, until Hugo Riley unearthed it and set about putting life back into it in 1988. Since then, 2 grain harvests have been successfully completed using it, and as demonstrated, it's still going strong. Here we see the Albion binder in operation again, this time being pulled by the ever-popular Fordson tractor. Using a tractor to pull this instead of horses mean that 2 people are needed, one to drive the tractor and one to work the binder. In the days before the binder, before it was invented, this was a way of cutting corn, using the reaper. This one was pulled by 2 Irish draft horses. Up until the 1940s, this would have been a frequent sight in late summer all over the country. Another 2-man operation. One is needed to drive the tractor, the other to lay off the corn for tying. Cutting corn was a very hard manual labour, not only for the person doing it, but also for all the men and women who would have had to tie and stook the sheaves of corn As they were cut, then the sheaves would be collected in a harvest wagon like this. This one dates from 1850. These 3-year-old piebald ponies are pulling a plough driven by Sean Mohan of Monaghan, a typical sight of yesteryear. And then when the land was ploughed, the clod breaker was used to help to break up the sods and the clods of earth. Two donkeys and a mule are being used to pull this ransom plough. This was not as labour intensive as it seems. The two people working it are only doing so for the sake of the rally. It would have taken one when used originally, as the donkeys are easily driven by one person. The clod breaker in full flight, standing on it while it's moving, breaks up the earth simply and effectively. Here again are the vivid colours that were once so common in the land. This brightly painted 60-year-old farm cart has been pulled by an Irish draft horse. Look at this John Deere tractor, manufactured in 1945. This is the first time in almost 100 years that these machines have been used in Southern Ireland. It's an amazing sight. While originally the famine was the inspiration for the invention of these engines, the alleviation of the hardships that people faced on Irish farms, these machines have always been rare in Ireland. Their cost was extremely prohibitive, and only the very big farmers could have afforded to own them. They work on a very simple principle, in pairs. One machine would have been situated on each headland, a 4-furrow balance plough, winched by a wire rope connected to each engine. The plough was then used by the engines over the field. The engines moved on a bit, the plough was then pulled back. While on the fields machinery is being exhibited, here we have working demonstrations of farmyard and barn machinery. In the autumn, after the harvesting, it's time to thrash and mill, and that's exactly what this old wooden machine is doing. It's a stationary mill, over 100 years old, being driven by a stationary engine. Common in its time, this would have been used not in the fields, but probably in the barn, or perhaps weather permitting, occasionally out of doors. This much larger threshing machine is the Ransom mill, being driven by a 1917 steam engine. This is a very rare sight for any time, as there were only ever 6 of these mills in Ireland. Made in the United Kingdom in 1939, they were originally destined for Russia, but when the Second World War broke out, the order was diverted to Ireland instead. Unfortunately, only 2 remain in the country in working order today. Then we have, on a much smaller scale, this international Farmall Cub tractor. It's driving a Garvey thresher for light work around the farm. Yet again, another model of the Garvey thresher. This one has been driven by a 1904 Burrell steam engine.